Welcome back to Ash's Reality Recaps. This is Curse of Oak Island Speed Cap Season 11, Episode 18, May the Norse Be With You. Let's jump right into it. Why is it called May the Norse Be With You? Well, way in the way back, apparently the Vikings loaded up a bunch of boats, roughly 500 boats I think they said, maybe 50, I don't know. They loaded up a bunch of boats with Vikings, went to Jerusalem, met with the Templars. For some god-awful reason, they left all of their boats and all their Vikings in Jerusalem with the Templars, and the few went back to being Vikings. Apparently and supposedly, all of these Vikings became Templars, which is supposedly how the Templars knew about Oak Island. So we're throwing a dart at a board here, and we're saying, well, because the Vikings were 600 miles north of Oak Island, and they took a bunch of Vikings in their boats to Jerusalem and met the Templars, they left them there. When the Templars had to flee, those Vikings went, hey, we know where there's an island that looks like a dog in the middle of nowhere. Let's go bury everything there. And the Templars loaded up all their boats on their Viking boats, and they floated directly to Oak Island, and that's where they buried everything. So that's how they tied the Vikings to the Templars, and hence, may the Norse be with you. Now, let's move into our next point. As with everything in the show, last week they found this tiny little piece of metal here at the bottom of the garden shaft. They actually found two tiny pieces of metal at the bottom of the garden shaft. They called in their expert metallurgist. He's a blacksmith, Carmen Legg. During his conversation, he said, oh, this is definitely not something that was made or used to build the structure. It looks like it was probably something that could have been nailed into the side to hold a lantern, to which the entire team went, or make a treasure chest. So you can see how they really stretched and reached for straws here. Carmen said this was used to hold a lantern most likely, and they said, or to make a treasure chest. So yeah, grasping at straws, that's what was at the bottom of the garden shaft. Let's stick with the garden shaft. Okay, so last week at the bottom of the garden shaft, they finally found all this old timber from the tunnel that's running somewhere into the Big Blob and Baby Blob. It's something we hear about 20 times every episode, but just so you know that you get to hear it too, the Big Blob and the Baby Blob, that the gold and silver supposedly were found in water testing. Anywho, at the bottom of the garden shaft, they found all this lumber that was supposedly part of this tunnel. Lo and behold, they come to find out that the tunnel had to be dismantled, partially dismantled at some point after it was constructed, or collapsed, or they really don't know, but their speculation is that it was dismantled after being constructed, which makes it more mysterious. Or it just collapsed because there's been 3,000 holes dug on the island, but God only knows how that happened. But anyhow, they pulled these timbers out from the bottom of the garden shaft. They're going to do some testing on them and find out what the age on these timbers are, and we all know it's going to come back to around 12 to 1700, somewhere in that range, because that's pretty much where everything hits on the island, between 12 and 1700. So, sometime between 12 and 1700, people were on the island, they dug a bunch of tunnels, they left this timber underground, they partially dismantled it, or it collapsed, God only knows, but anyhow, that's what's at the bottom of the garden shaft. Nothing right now. Over on Lot 5, the archaeologists finally found a copper coin inside of that foundation, and a piece of metal that turned out to be a very thin spike that, again, wasn't used for building anything. It just looked like a very thin spike. But they finally found a copper coin inside of the foundation, which shows that there was a copper coin inside the foundation, and at some point somebody lived inside of this foundation. Well, the structure that used to be on top of the foundation. But that's Lot 5 for the episode. Let's move on. And last, but certainly not least, on the Curse of Oak Island, because there's so much more mystery to be had. Over in the swamp area, digging under the swamp near the paved road, the team found a wooden structure under the dirt. Again, this is very similar to the other wooden structures that were down on the beach in past seasons, where they partially unearth them. They say, yeah, it looks pretty old. They cut a piece off so they can carbon date it, find out that, again, it's sometime between the 1200s and the 1700s, and then they bury it back over. I don't know why they're not excavating these things like they do over on Lot 5, but apparently they're not that interested in the wooden structures that are actually over in the area of the Stone Road, the swamp, and the Money Pit area. They're only interested in the one that's over on Lot 5. But anyhow, that's what happened this week in the Curse of Oak Island. Hopefully that saves you an hour of your life. I actually enjoyed last night's episode. It was pretty neat to see those timbers come out of the garden shaft. They did finally find a coin over on lot number 5. One coin. And again, they found some wood in the swamp, so no shock there. See you next week for the